The cowboy never expected one act of kindness to follow him home. After rescuing a young Apache woman from a deadly winter storm, he thought he would never see her again. But just before sunrise, the sound of hundreds of horses echoed across the frozen valley. As he stepped outside his ranch, he found Apache warriors surrounding his land. Had they come for revenge, or was there another reason for their visit? What happened next would change his life forever. The first heavy snow of the season had arrived earlier than anyone expected. Cold wind swept across the open plains, carrying thick snow that covered every trail leading through the valley. The mountains disappeared behind a curtain of white, and even the tallest pine trees were barely visible. Jacob Turner pulled his coat tighter around his shoulders as he guided his horse toward home. "It is only a little farther," he said, gently patting the horse's neck. The old horse snorted softly and continued through the deep snow. Jacob had spent the day delivering supplies to a nearby settlement. The trip home should have taken only a few hours, but the storm had slowed everything. Every landmark looked the same beneath the snow, and the familiar trail had almost disappeared. His small ranch sat beyond the hills, where a warm fireplace and a simple meal were waiting. That thought kept him moving through the bitter cold. Suddenly, his horse stopped. Jacob clicked his tongue, encouraging him to continue. Instead, the horse stood perfectly still. "What is it, boy?" The horse lowered its head toward a snow-covered patch beside a cluster of pine trees. Jacob climbed down and walked carefully through the deep snow. At first he saw nothing except a thick wool blanket almost completely buried beneath the drifting snow. He bent down to pull it free. Then he froze. Someone was beneath it. Jacob quickly brushed away the snow with both hands. A young Apache woman lay curled against the frozen ground. Her face was pale from the cold, and snow covered her long black hair. Her breathing was slow, but steady. "Can you hear me?" Jacob asked gently. Her eyes opened only slightly. She looked at him but was too weak to speak. Without hesitation, Jacob removed his heavy coat and wrapped it around her. "You are going to be all right," he said calmly. "We just have to get you somewhere warm." With great care, he lifted her onto his horse before climbing up behind her. The ride back to the ranch felt longer than ever. Snow continued to fall, and the wind pushed against them from every direction. Jacob spoke softly during the journey, hoping the sound of his voice would keep her awake. "You are almost there." At last, the warm glow of his cabin appeared through the storm. Jacob carried the young woman inside and placed her beside the stone fireplace. He added fresh wood until bright flames filled the room with warmth. He heated a pot of soup and warmed several blankets near the fire. After some time, the young woman slowly opened her eyes. She looked around the small cabin before her gaze settled on Jacob. "You saved me," she whispered. Jacob smiled kindly. "I simply found someone who needed help." A tear quietly rolled down her cheek. "My family will be searching for me." "They will not stop," she continued softly. "They will believe I was lost in the storm." Jacob handed her a warm cup. "Then when the weather clears," he said, "we will help them find you." For the first time since the storm began, the young woman managed a small smile. Outside, the snow continued to fall. Inside the little cabin, two strangers sat beside the fire, unaware that one simple act of kindness was about to bring their worlds together in a way neither of them could have imagined. The storm continued for 3 more days. Snow covered the ranch so deeply that even the fence posts were almost hidden. The narrow trail leading to the valley disappeared beneath fresh layers of snow, making travel impossible. Jacob was in no hurry. He spent each morning carrying firewood into the cabin and making sure the horses had enough hay and fresh water. The young Apache woman slowly regained her strength, helping whenever she could. "My name is Kaya," she said one morning as they shared a simple breakfast. "Jacob," he replied with a smile. "It is good to finally know your name." Each day became a little easier. While Jacob repaired a broken chair beside the fireplace, Kaya carefully stitched a torn blanket using thread she carried in a small pouch. Her hands moved with quiet confidence, and before long the blanket looked almost new. "You have done this many times," Jacob said. "My grandmother taught me," Kaya replied. "She believed that if something can be repaired, it deserves another chance." Jacob nodded thoughtfully. "My father used to say almost the same thing." As the days passed, They shared stories about their lives. Jacob spoke about growing up on the ranch, learning to care for horses, and missing the family who had built the little cabin years before. Kaya told him about traveling with her family across the mountains, gathering around evening fires, and listening to the stories told by the elders under a sky full of stars. Although their lives had been very different, they discovered they shared many of the same values. Both believed in honesty. Both respected hard work. Both understood the importance of helping others without expecting anything in return. On the fourth morning, Jacob opened the cabin door. The wind had become still. Bright sunlight reflected across the fresh snow. As he looked toward the distant hills, he noticed several lines of horse tracks leading into the valley. Someone was searching. Jacob quietly called to Kaya. She stepped outside, followed the tracks with her eyes, and whispered with hope, "My family has found my trail." Neither of them knew that by sunrise the next day, visitors would arrive at the ranch, bringing a moment neither would ever forget. The following morning, Jacob woke before sunrise. The cabin was quiet except for the gentle crackle of the fireplace. As he stepped outside with a bucket to collect fresh water, he noticed something unusual. Across the snow-covered valley stood dozens of riders. They waited silently beneath the pale morning sky, their horses standing as still as the pine trees around them. Jacob paused for a moment. He had never seen so many visitors near his ranch. Hearing the horses, Kaya stepped onto the porch beside him. The moment she looked across the valley, her eyes filled with joy. "My family," she whispered. Without another word, she hurried through the snow toward them. An older woman rushed forward and wrapped Kaya in a warm embrace. A man with silver streaks in his dark hair smiled with relief before placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. Nearby, a young boy laughed as he held tightly to her arm, unwilling to let go. Jacob watched quietly from the porch, grateful that she was finally home. After a few moments, Kaya turned and waved for him to come closer. He walked across the snowy field with calm, steady steps. Kaya spoke with the elder, explaining how Jacob had found her during the storm, carried her safely to his cabin, and cared for her until she recovered. The elder listened carefully before stepping toward Jacob. He placed a hand over his heart. "You protected someone precious to our family," he said warmly. "For that, you have our deepest gratitude." Jacob smiled. "I only did what I hoped someone would do for me." The elder nodded with quiet respect. Kindness always finds its way back. The visitors accepted Jacob's invitation to warm themselves by the fire before beginning their journey home. Soon the cabin was filled with friendly conversation, warm food, and grateful smiles. As the sun rose above the snowy hills, Jacob realized that the storm had brought far more than a stranger to his door. It had brought the beginning of a friendship that would last for many years. Several weeks passed, and winter slowly began to loosen its grip on the valley. Although the worst of the snow had melted, the season had left Jacob's ranch in rough condition. Strong winds had damaged fences, and fallen branches blocked the path leading to his barn. The work ahead seemed endless for one person. Early one morning, Jacob heard the sound of horses approaching. When he stepped outside, he smiled in surprise. Kaya had returned. She was not alone. Several members of her family had come with wagons filled with lumber, tools, and supplies. Without waiting to be asked, they began repairing broken fences, clearing fallen trees, and strengthening the barn before the spring rains arrived. Jacob worked beside them from sunrise until evening. There was laughter, shared meals, and easy conversation throughout the day. As the final fence was repaired, the elder looked across the ranch with satisfaction. "You helped our family when you expected nothing in return," he said. "Today, we simply returned that kindness." Jacob looked around at the restored ranch and the smiling faces gathered together. He realized that the greatest reward for helping someone was not receiving gifts. It was knowing that one act of compassion had brought people together who might never have met otherwise. Spring arrived, covering the valley with green grass and wildflowers. Jacob's ranch was full of life once again, and the memory of the winter storm had become a story shared with every traveler who stopped by. Near the front gate, Jacob placed a simple wooden sign that read, "Every traveler is welcome here." People from nearby ranches, small towns, and distant trails often stopped for fresh water, a warm meal, or a place to rest. No one was turned away. Kaya and her family visited often, not as guests, but as trusted friends. They shared stories, celebrated the changing seasons, and reminded one another that kindness could build bridges where fear once stood. As the sun set behind the mountains one peaceful evening, Jacob looked across the valley and smiled. He had rescued one person from a winter storm. In return, he had found something even greater. A lasting friendship, a stronger community, and a home where every stranger was welcomed with an open heart. As the sun dipped behind the snow-covered mountains, the little ranch grew quiet once more. Long after the winter storm had passed, people still remembered the day one cowboy chose compassion over fear. His simple decision not only saved a life but also brought two communities together through trust, respect, and friendship. Sometimes the greatest legacy is not found in grand acts, but in the kindness we show when no one expects it. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more original Old West stories filled with courage, hope, unforgettable journeys, and heartfelt moments. Share this story with your friends and family to remind them that one act of kindness can change more lives than we ever imagine. We would love to hear from you in the comments. If you had found someone alone during that winter storm, what would you have done? Thank you for watching. Until our next Old West adventure, take care, stay kind, and we will see you in the next story.